a dark embrace. Nyana had never been one to chase adventure. She preferred the familiar, the predictable. Her life followed a simple routine. Wake up, feed her grumpy Persian cat, Noir, and head to the elegant bar where she worked. Her apartment was a stark contrast to the world she worked in. Small, with peeling wallpaper, a rickety old heater that clanked in the night, and a mismatched collection of second-hand furniture. Though it was far from luxurious, it was her sanctuary, a place where she could retreat from the overwhelming noise of the world. Some nights she stared at the cracks in the ceiling and wondered if this was all life had to offer her. But at least it was her own space, her own quiet corner of existence. It wasn't much, but it was home. She loved the ambiance of the bar, the deep red velvet curtains, the golden crystal chandeliers casting a soft, opulent glow, and the way the air was always thick with murmured conversations and the gentle clinking of glasses. The clientele walked in with an air of effortless confidence, their designer attire shimmering under the dim lights. It was a place of whispered secrets and elegant indulgence, but she remained an outsider looking in, merely serving cocktails while the rich and beautiful laughed, flirted, and lived. Her past relationship had left her wary of romance. After finding her childhood sweetheart tangled up with another woman after so many years, she'd closed herself off, retreating behind layers of foundation, blush, and mascara. Her porcelain skin and nearly white blonde hair gave her an ethereal beauty, but instead of embracing it, she fought against it. She didn't want to look like some haunting specter. She wanted to appear normal to fit in. Yet deep down, she struggled with the contradiction. She yearned for acceptance, but feared losing herself in the process. Only later would she realize that her beauty, as unnatural as she once believed it to be, was something to embrace, not hide. The makeup was her armor, dulling the ghostly pallor that made people stare. It was easier to blend in, easier to be invisible. That evening, though, something shifted. A group of patrons entered the bar, their presence commanding immediate attention. They were dressed in impeccable fashion, men in tailored suits, women in sleek gowns. Nyana was pouring a glass of whiskey when she felt it, the weight of a gaze pressing against her. She turned slightly and locked eyes with him. He sat at the far end of the bar, his striking dark eyes never leaving her. He was tall, with wavy black hair and a chiseled jawline. Something about his stare sent a shiver down her spine. It wasn't the usual appreciation or lust she sometimes encountered. No, his gaze was one of curiosity, as though he were assessing her. As the evening progressed, one of the elegantly dressed women leaned in. "You should come to a party tonight," she said, scribbling an address on a napkin. "It'll be fun." Nyana barely acknowledged the invitation at the time, simply tucking the note into her apron. But later, as she closed up, she found herself staring at the address. The city lights flickered outside, and Noir would be fine for one night. What did she have to lose? The address led her to an upscale penthouse. The moment the door opened, she was greeted by a strikingly handsome host, his presence as compelling as the man from the bar. The suite was a Gothic dream, tall arched windows framed by heavy black velvet curtains that billowed slightly with the night breeze, their dark folds swallowing the dim candlelight. Candelabras stood like sentinels along the walls, casting flickering golden light onto intricately woven tapestries depicting eerie, almost lifelike figures frozen in silent revelry. Gilded mirrors reflected the flames, their surfaces slightly tarnished, distorting reflections just enough to feel like ghosts lurked in the corners. The air was thick, with the scent of aged wine and exotic incense, mingling in a heady perfume that made the atmosphere feel intoxicatingly surreal. The scent of aged wine and incense curled through the air like a whispered spell, and the furniture was a decadent blend of Victorian and modern noir, all dark mahogany and crushed velvet. The party guests moved gracefully, their whispered laughter echoing as though they were part of an ancient, elegant secret. It was a world apart from anything Nyana had ever known, and she felt like she had stepped into the pages of a Gothic romance come to life. Nyana was handed a glass of champagne, and despite her low tolerance for alcohol, she sipped. The man from the bar approached, his eyes gleaming with amusement. He was like a dream, a masterpiece, sculpted from shadow and moonlight with high cheekbones, a sharp jawline, and lips that hinted at both danger and seduction. His presence was magnetic, the kind that made the world blur at the edges. "I didn't think you'd come," he said, his voice a velvety whisper that sent shivers down her spine. "Neither did I." They talked. He introduced himself as Lucian, his voice smooth as silk, wrapping around her like a spell. His charm was effortless, intoxicating, as if he had perfected the art of seduction over centuries. Nyana felt herself drowning in the intensity of his gaze, her heartbeat hammering against her ribs. Every word, every movement felt choreographed yet natural, a strange juxtaposition that left her lightheaded. The air between them thickened, charged with something electric and primal. He reached out, fingertips grazing her cheek, sending a cascade of shivers down her spine. Her breath hitched as he tilted her chin up, his lips hovering inches from hers, his dark eyes glowing with an unreadable hunger. Her mind screamed a warning, but it was too late. Pain, sharp and sudden. Chaos erupted. Gasps and hisses filled the room. Nyana barely registered what was happening, stumbling backward as the reality of the situation crashed down on her. Her fingers brushed the wound on her neck, her pulse thundering in her ears. The room spun, shadows flickering wildly from the candlelight. The guests' once seductive charm melted into something predatory, their movements too smooth, too inhuman. Panic surged through her veins. She spun on her heel and ran, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps. Lucian's voice called after her, but she didn't dare look back. She weaved through the stunned guests, her adrenaline-fueled instincts guiding her toward an exit. Spotting a fire escape door, she slammed against it, shoving it open as she burst into the cold night air. She ran, down the alley, through the streets, not stopping until her lungs burned. By the time she reached her apartment, her hands trembled violently as she fumbled for her keys. She shoved the door open, practically throwing herself inside before slamming it shut. Heart hammering, she bolted every single lock, then wedged a chair under the doorknob for good measure. Her breath came in frantic gasps as she pressed her back against the door, sinking to the floor. Noir meowed lazily from the couch, oblivious to her terror. Nyana clenched her fists, trying to process the night's insanity. But one thing was clear. Whatever had happened back there, it wasn't over. The next morning she woke up groggy, her head pounding. Noir sat on her chest, glaring at her as if sensing something was off. Then the hunger hit. It wasn't normal hunger. It was deep, gnawing, unnatural. She staggered to her kitchen, eyeing a leftover burger. One bite and she gagged. The thought of food repulsed her. But maybe she just needed something fresher. Deciding to cook a proper meal for herself for the first time in weeks, tired of takeout and instant meals, she grabbed her coat and headed to the grocery store. As she reached the butcher's section, her stomach twisted at the sight of the raw cuts of meat on display. The deep red of the steaks, the marbled textures, the faint scent of iron in the air, it all made her dizzy. Her fingers curled around the handle of her shopping basket, her breathing uneven. Then the butcher behind the counter accidentally nicked his finger with a knife. A single drop of blood beaded at the cut, and an overwhelming rush of hunger surged through her. The world blurred, everything narrowing to that single crimson droplet. Panicked, she abandoned her basket and rushed out of the store, her heart slamming against her ribs. She knew now. Something was very, very wrong. Nope. 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 She muttered, pacing. This isn't happening. I am not a vampire. That's ridiculous. Yet over the next few days, she couldn't deny the changes. Her reflection had started to fade. Her skin grew even paler, which she didn't think was possible. And worst of all, she could hear things. Conversations through walls, heartbeats. Noir's annoyed grumbling sounded like full sentences. Her first attempt at drinking blood was a disaster. She tried to be sophisticated about it, ordering a rare steak at a diner, only to end up accidentally sucking on an ice cube in panic when the waiter asked if everything was okay. The blood bank idea was worse. She had no idea how to approach that, and when she tried to sneak in, she tripped over her own feet and set off an alarm. Desperation led her back to the bar. Lucian was there, waiting. "I was wondering when you'd come back," he said, smirking. Nyana glared. "You turned me into a vampire." "I barely grazed you." "That's apparently enough." Lucian chuckled. "I suppose I should teach you how to survive." And so began Nyana's crash course in vampirism. At least it was supposed to. But the more time she spent around Lucian and his kind, the more she saw his true nature. He was cold, detached, and egotistical to an almost unbearable degree. There was no warmth in his guidance, no real concern for her struggle. Vampires cared for nothing but themselves, indulging in their eternal existence with a narcissistic superiority that repulsed her. Nyana quickly realized she wanted nothing to do with them. If this was what being a vampire meant, she would find her own way. Rejecting their mentorship, she set out on her own, stumbling through the terrifying hunger and the unfamiliar sensations that overwhelmed her. Every day was a battle, each moment a struggle between her humanity and the monstrous cravings inside her. Loneliness weighed heavily on her shoulders, the isolation sharper than ever before. One evening, as she sat alone on the rooftop of the bar where she worked, the city lights flickering like distant stars, she made her decision. She had spent days fighting an impossible hunger, resisting the urges that clawed at her from within. She did not want to be a monster, an unethical beast that preyed on the innocent. She would not live like this. With a quiet resignation, she walked behind the bar, retrieving a bottle of the finest champagne. She left a crisp stack of bills beside a hastily scribbled note to her manager. "Thank you for everything. Goodbye." Taking the bottle, she climbed the fire escape to the rooftop, the cool wind whipping through her hair. She would wait for the sunrise. Let the first golden rays cleanse her of this curse. As she unscrewed the cork and took a sip, savoring the bittersweet taste, she heard footsteps behind her. Turning, she found herself staring at a man, tall, impossibly handsome, his presence both comforting and unnerving. His dark eyes met hers with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. "You don't have to do this," he said, his voice deep, steady. Nyana narrowed her eyes. "And who exactly are you?" The stranger took a step closer, his expression unreadable. "Someone who understands. Someone who can help." Nyana let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. "Help? There is no help for me. I'm a monster. I can't live like this. I won't." His gaze softened. "You're not a monster, Nyana. You've just been shown the wrong way. Vampirism isn't about losing yourself. It's about choice. About control." She turned away, gripping the neck of the champagne bottle. "Control? You don't understand. The hunger, it claws at me. I can barely think past it. And the ones who turned me? They were selfish, cruel, inhumane. Because they chose to be, but you don't have to. There is another way." She hesitated, her breath hitching. "And what way is that?" He stepped beside her, gazing over the city lights. "You don't have to prey on the innocent. There are ways to survive without losing yourself. Ways to feed without harming others. You just need guidance. True guidance. And I can give that to you." Nyana studied him, searching his face for deception, but all she found was sincerity, hope, for the first time in days, The suffocating despair loosened its grip on her chest. Maybe, just maybe, she wasn't beyond saving. As she looked at the man before her, realization struck like a bolt of lightning. This was no ordinary handsome stranger. He was Tony Devereux, her real boss, the elusive and powerful owner of not just this bar, but a string of high-end establishments across the city, including luxury restaurants and hotels. She had heard whispers of him, his ruthless business acumen, his ability to turn any venture into gold, and his enigmatic charm. But never imagined she would meet him under such circumstances. Before she could react, he scooped her up effortlessly, carrying her princess style down from the rooftop. "First things first," he said with a reassuring smirk. "You're not dying tonight." He took her to one of his private residences, a grand yet welcoming penthouse where he introduced her to an alternative way of surviving. Instead of preying on the innocent, he provided her with blood bags, donated from willing sources, ensuring she could feed without guilt. Slowly, he guided her, not only in controlling her urges but also in rediscovering herself. He encouraged her to embrace her ethereal beauty rather than hide it beneath layers of makeup. With his influence, she underwent an elegant transformation, her wardrobe replaced with refined, sophisticated outfits that made her confidence bloom. More importantly, she found a renewed purpose. He saw the potential in her and offered her a higher position within his company. Under her careful management, the bar's revenue tripled as she implemented changes that enhanced both the experience and profits. She no longer blended into the background. She commanded the space with grace and authority. Through the late nights and countless shared moments, something unexpected blossomed between them. The enigmatic businessman who had once only intended to help found himself captivated by the fiery determination in her eyes. He watched as she flourished, no longer the timid, self-doubting woman she had been, but a striking, confident force. One evening, as they stood in the dim glow of the bar, he brushed a stray lock of her hair from her face, his fingers lingering just a second too long. "You've changed so much," he murmured, his dark eyes searching hers. "You're radiant." Nyana felt her breath catch, warmth rising to her cheeks despite the coolness of her new nature. "I had a good teacher," she teased, trying to mask the flutter in her chest. His lips curled into a knowing smirk. "I merely guided you. The strength, the brilliance, that was already inside you." She studied him, the man who had once been a mystery, a distant force of power. Now he was something more, something she never expected to find. "You never intended to care for me like this, did you?" she asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. His smirk faltered, replaced by something raw, something real. "No," he admitted, his thumb grazing her cheek. "I was only meant to help you. But somewhere along the way, I realized I couldn't imagine a world where you weren't beside me." Nyana's heart clenched at his words, a slow smile forming on her lips. She had once thought herself lost, cursed, unworthy of love or belonging, but now, in his arms, she felt something she never thought possible. Home. As she looked up at him, her breath hitched. The air between them grew electric, an unspoken tension crackling in the space they shared. Before she could fully process it, Tony reached out, his strong fingers brushing against her cheek, sending a cascade of warmth through her. "You are exquisite, Nyana," he murmured, his voice low, rich with emotion. "And you're mine, if you'll have me." Her lips parted in surprise, but she found herself unable to look away from his deep, penetrating gaze. Before she could respond, he closed the distance, capturing her lips in a deep, searing kiss. It wasn't just passion, it was a claim, a promise, and a revelation all at once. Nyana melted into him, the hunger she had feared now replaced by something entirely different. Desire, longing, love. Without breaking the kiss, he lifted her effortlessly into his arms, carrying her as though she weighed nothing. "You're not just surviving anymore, Nyana, you're thriving, and you're going to be my one and only, my wife." Her heart thundered at his words, a wave of emotion washing over her, enveloping her like a warm, unbreakable embrace. The girl who once hid behind layers of makeup, who feared her own existence, had found something beyond survival. She had found love, acceptance, and purpose. She had feared becoming a monster, but with Tony, she realized she had become something else entirely: strong, confident, and cherished. As his arms held her securely, carrying her toward their future, she whispered, almost in disbelief, "I never thought I could have this." Tony pressed a tender kiss to her forehead, his voice steady, rich with unwavering devotion. "You were always meant for more, Nyana, and I'll spend eternity proving that to you." For the first time in her new life, she felt whole, cherished. As he carried her into the warmth of their shared future, she knew this was only the beginning.